Hello, fans, and welcome. It's official, the Arizona Coyotes have relocated to Utah, and while the season is over, the fun is about to begin. I'm Randon, and alongside my co-hosts Dustin and Ryan, we will bring you inside the team, giving you all the news, highlights, and an in-depth analysis on everything the NHL and Utah has to offer. Welcome to another episode of The Two Line Pass. Hello, fans. Welcome back. Another episode of the Two Line Pass podcast. Welcome in today. I'm Randon, here as always with Dustin and Ryan, ready to talk some Utah hockey with you. We have a really great episode planned today. We are going to talk about three things. First, obviously, the news breaking. The names of the team have been released. The poll has started. Voting has begun. Dustin's going to discuss some of the names with us and where we think the future of that is going to be. Then we've got Toothless Tommy on the mic who's going to come in and talk about where the franchise has been. What is the history of this team? A lot of you know that it's the Arizona Coyotes. Do you know what has happened 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago in the franchise's history? Toothless Tommy is going to walk you through that, give you a little bit of information on the franchise as we move forward. And then I'm going to bring it in and talk to you about what you can expect from the draft from a new fan's perspective. How is it different from the other sports that you know? And we're going to have a lot of fun with this episode. And as always, we're going to continue to hear your feedback. If you would like to talk anything, just let us know. Hit us up on Twitter at Two Line Pass. But for now, Dustin, Ryan, how are you guys feeling tonight?
I feel amazing. I feel super. Feel great. How are you?
Living the dream, my friend, watching playoff hockey. Your Dallas Stars, as of recording, are doing quite well up on the Colorado Avalanche. We'll see where they end up when this episode launches, but feeling pretty good.
Should have been a sweep. They let game one get away from them, and that was a little disappointing. That was going on while we were recording last week, and I said I was great because the Stars were up, I think, 3-0, and then bye-bye lead and bye-bye game.
That's playoff hockey for you. It's going to be ups, it's going to be downs, and what are you going to do? You know, we're going to be all cheering for the Stars just for this last couple of rounds or until they're out, and then it's all in on Utah. Ryan, how you feeling tonight, bud?
I'm doing good. It's been a good weekend, Found $40 extra in the ATM, yeah, so really, it's just on the up and up. Got to film a podcast today with you fellas. It's been a good week.
I feel like we've already won the Stanley Cup. That's how I feel. And Dustin, let's start this episode off right. I'm going to pass the time off to you, Dustin. Why don't you take us away?
Okay, so there are 20 names in the poll that Ryan Smith put out, and I think he's putting this to a poll because with the Utah Jazz, he did like the rebrand, and he just did what he wanted, and he didn't really get any outside information. He's just like, I like this color, put something together, and wound up with the worst jerseys that the NBA has ever seen. So I think now he's just gone the extreme opposite way. He's like, okay, I'm not only going to get feedback into what the name should be, I'm going to let the fans decide what the name should be. So there's 20 names that they came up with. A lot of them aren't great. So I'm just going to sort of rapid fire, name all 20 of them, and then we can discuss any ones that we want to talk about. Some of the ones that we've seen bounced around social media, some of the favorites. But you've got the Utah HC for hockey club. Utah Venom, Blast, Fury, Freeze, Frost, Glaciers, Blizzard, Powder, Ice, Squall. Like this, the first 11, and it just sounds like he asked AI to come up with names about winter. The Hive, Swarm, Canyons, Mammoth, Caribou, Mountaineers, Yeti, Outlaws, and Black Diamonds. And there are a lot of bad names in there. I like a few of them. One of the more popular names is the Utah Cutthroat, and I'm glad that's not in there. And maybe like the PC side of me, but I don't like the fact that a sport that has so many instances of players actually getting their throat cut on the ice. I don't want my team named after cutthroats. Like the last thing we need is our goalie to take a skate to the jugular and be bleeding out on the ice wearing a jersey that says Cutthroats. But I like a few of them. I like Squall. that's like the best of the winter themed names just because of what a squall is. It's like a fast moving, powerful storm. I got caught in one time, and it was like I left my house with no snow on the ground, grabbed food to go at Buffalo Wild Wings, and there was about 10 inches of snow on the ground as I was driving home. Just that sounds like a cool, powerful, intimidating name, except I don't know most people know what a squall is. Like, I got the alert on my phone saying there's a squall coming into Utah. I had no damned idea what that meant until I looked it up and like, oh, I better go get the food real quick then. So before that, I had no idea what it is. I think a lot of people, if the name is the squall, a lot of people won't know what it is. So I think I've sort of talked myself out of liking the name. Now I don't like it anymore. I like Mammoth just because of some of the like jersey and logo mock-ups I've seen. Some of them I wouldn't mind having on a sweater or on a hat. A lot of those logos that I've seen look cool. Outlaws is okay, but it seems kind of like a travel ball team name. And so does the Venom, which is one of the more popular ones that I've seen. A lot of people like that. But it wouldn't surprise me based on what I've seen people talking about online and the names that they like. I think it might wind up being the Utah Black Diamonds, which seems cool. It ties into the skiing of the state and the greatest snow on earth. There's not a lot of great names in there, so it almost feels like you're picking the best of a bad situation. I know the names that we said a couple of weeks ago aren't on the list. The name that I like isn't on the list. The name that Ryan tossed out that in episode 1 isn't on the list. So what do you guys think? I'll ask Ryan, is there one of these? I see you on the camera kind of shaking your head at some of the ones that I've said that I like. What do you like in that list?
All right, so my problem, it's not that I don't like them. It's that 90% of these team names focus on Northern Utah exclusive things. And that leaves out the entire bottom half of the state to just be like, why? You know what I mean? Like, if we're going to do something for Utah, I don't think we should go to just a strictly winter thing. I'm not saying Canyons is a good choice, because it's not. But Swarm, to me, or Yeti, seems to be the best two. I like the Swarm. And so far on every other podcast I've listened to, they all have been tossing out garbage names because they all don't know what the Beehive State even means. They all think we're just like the worker bee state, or we have a lot of bees in the state. And that's not what it's about. For those of you who don't know, it's about the hive mentality of the Mormons, and they want everybody to be working together for the greater good. So I like the Swarm. And somebody put up a mock jerseys of the Swarm that just got released, and they looked pretty sick. I don't like the Mammoths just because I think of the Colorado Mammoths, the lacrosse team, but that's just me.
And I did see, I said Black Diamonds. I did see that there is a women's hockey league here in Utah where there's one of the women's teams is named the Utah Black Diamonds. So they might have to pay off a small little local team to get that name from them if that's what they wind up going with.
Maybe that
Brandon,
team
what
saw
do you
the
like out
writing.
of that bunch?
That team saw the writing on the wall, and that's a copyright squat if I've ever seen it. It's like buying up a .com of an emerging business, and then you force that business to pay you money to get the name out of it. I've seen that technique. But no, I was shocked. I to be 100% honest with you, it does feel like, looking at the choices, it feels a lot like the Illusion of Choice to me. It feels like he knows where he wants to go. He knows what it is. And the name that he's picked, this is my opinion. I don't have any insider knowledge on this, but I believe the name that the team will be on is among that. And I don't think it will matter who gets the most votes. I think he's already decided. I think he's got a team working on the logo, the design, and the thematic elements of the team, I think, are all ready to go. And this is just to keep the energy level high, to keep the engagement level high, because let's be honest, like Caribou, why is Caribou even on the list other than him maybe being a good dad and he let his kids throw out a name, right? And he's like, see, I'm going to put, this was my kid's choice and I told him I would, and great father moment. It's a really great father moment. That's not a very good NHL owner moment, because the Caribou is an absolute terrible name for a hockey team, especially I have never once seen a caribou in any captivity or native. It just has nothing to do with Utah. And it's like, why is that on the list? It doesn't make any sense to me.
If we're going with a hooved animal, we should just be the moose or the moose knucks, and it could be a cool fighting moose. Like, that's at least a four-legged ungulate that is native to Utah.
Yeah, and I what I was saying is, like, I think I get what you're saying in terms of, like, the illusion of choice. Because, like, a lot of those names, like the first 11 or 12 that I named, Frost and Freeze and Blizzard, Powder, Ice, like, it feels like just names that are on the list that nobody's going to pick. And then he included his 3, 4, or 5 that he really likes, that he knows, like, this is more than likely what it's going to wind up. Whether or not the fan vote actually matters, I'm not sure. But, like, I think he has 3 or 4 that he really likes. He's like, I'd be fine with any of those. And then you just have these terrible options because he's almost, in a way, like, trying to fix it to the ones that he likes. Because a lot of those are just terrible options. But yeah, like Ryan said, at least, like, a moose is native to Utah and it's here. Like, one of the names that I saw, it's not on the list, but it's a name that I saw tossed around leading up to when the list was unveiled, was like the Utah Stags. Like, stags aren't even in the United States. That's on the other side of the globe. There's no stags in Utah. There's no stags in the United States and in Northern America. Why would they be the Stags? It's just, other than it's a cool name and you can come up with some cool logo ideas for that. It just,
maybe that is a thing to consider, because he's obviously a very intelligent man. He's a very savvy businessman. I believe he is a very creative person as well. I wonder, maybe there was a lot of these choices were not necessarily having to tie in too heavily with a Utah identity or a state identity or anything like that, but maybe that just from a design perspective, that a lot of these names, maybe the logo he saw for the Caribou is just so incredible on a hockey jersey. He was like, this has to be on the list. And if they saw what I saw, they would choose this without a doubt. Maybe that is playing a part. And I think for me, for my fandom perspective, is I look at a couple of things. First, in terms of like cheering for the team, is there a natural way to cheer for the team? So think of at the minor league hockey level, you know, we've got Go Grizz Go, things like that, like something simple that works with a Go Team Go or a cheer of some kind. But we can hedge, and I think Utah, the word Utah can work in almost any cheer that we have as a stadium. So the actual name of the team might not matter, and they might just go with Utah. So my second most important thing then would be the jerseys. And I'm really hoping for amazing jerseys, because I think there are some incredible NHL jerseys right now, and maybe some that I'm less enthusiastic about. But like the Mammoth, the reason I want it is because I saw the mock-up of the Mammoth jerseys and they look so incredible. I would wear it every day. Like I would buy every piece of gear ever made for that particular logo, which I mean was probably not the logo they were going to use, but how many variations of Mammoth can there be? So I just hope whatever it is picked, I hope that we get some really cool gear out of it. I hope we get a really cool jersey. My vote is I am now very heavily on Swarm, and I'm very heavily on Outlaws. And I want to see if we do Outlaws. Somebody suggested doing the bones of a cattle on, think of a desert cattle, and you've got a decomposed cattle, and the horns make the U for the state of Utah. And it was a really cool mock-up, and I would love to see something like that. So I'm going Swarm. I'm going Outlaws. As long as we get some really cool gear, I think I'll be okay with anything.
I'm sort of leaning Swarm myself, so I think we're just 3 across the board, either Swarm or I'd be okay with Outlaws too. But I think just as a show, we're on board with Swarm.
Should we give it the 2-line pass stamp of approval, the Utah Swarm?
Stamp it up.
Make that a triple stamp.
You can't triple stamp a double
stamp. You can't
stamp.
triple stamp a double stamp.
We just did.
We did. It was double stamped. We triple stamped it. It's triple stamped.
We make the rules.
do love it. I'm excited to see, and I wonder too. Have we thought about? Do you think he'll do like a runoff type thing? Like, okay, these were the 5 most voted on. Let's vote on these 5. Like, is he going to do maybe like an 8-name bracket? I haven't heard anything, but I wonder what he's going to do to narrow it down, or if it's literally whichever gets the most votes of these 20, that's it.
I hope he breaks it down.
That may be the way that he sort of tilts it the way that he wants it to go. Like if it's one of the names that he wants, then that's the one that wins. And if it comes down to like the top 5, but the one that he likes wasn't there, then maybe he'll do a runoff at the top 5 and try to swing for it again.
Time's going to tell, and we're going to be right there to let you know as soon as we know. And keep voting, keep looking for it, keep watching, keep putting your input out there, keep having those discussions. I think the more engagement, the more discussions there are around this topic, the better it's going to be for everybody. The more engaged it's going to be, the more engaged the design process is going to be. And our opinion as fans, I think, is going to matter and be taken into account. So I'm excited for it, and we'll see what ends up happening. Ryan, we're also keeping a close eye on the franchise as it continues to evolve, continues to come into full focus here in Utah. But as we've talked about, and as many people know, this is not a new expansion team. This is a team that has been in existence for quite some time, and I think there's still some history that needs to be discussed, elaborated on, and the new fan needs to be brought in, and that's what we're going to have. Ryan's going to talk to us about the history of the franchise. Ryan, I'm going to let you just take it away.
All right, so our story begins on July 1st, 1996. The Winnipeg Jets, a longtime NHL franchise, were having a lot of financial issues, so they decided to move the team. Gary Bettman believed that because Phoenix was the 5th most populated city in the U.S. at the time, moving an NHL team there would be an absolute slam dunk monetarily. Richard Burke, the owner of the Coyotes, planned to build a stadium in Scottsdale. Wayne Gretzky as a minority owner and director of hockey operations. They struck a deal for the Glendale Stadium. Now, there are fewer people in the city of Glendale than Phoenix, but the land was cheaper and available. The plan was to build an entire entertainment district, and Glendale approved it, and the construction began into 2001 and was completed in 2003. The first game of the Coyotes was played in front of a sold-out 19,000 fans. They did, however, miss the playoffs that first year of 2003-2004, and then they had the lockout of 04-05 that happened. And after the lockout, Wayne Gretzky appointed himself to be the head coach of the Arizona Coyotes, and that lasted from 04 to 2009. They made the playoffs one time during Wayne's 5 years as coach, including 4 years in a row missing the playoffs. The lack of success was a major factor in the team not selling any tickets, as well as the entertainment district took 2 extra years to be built. The original plan was they were going to pay off the taxes of building the district with revenue from ticket sales and merchandise, but since the team wasn't competitive, there really wasn't any money. And then because of the contract for the stadium in Glendale, the team was left with the bill, and they were losing upwards of $40 million per season. So the team then sold to the owner of the Arizona Diamondbacks. His last name is Moses, I think, or Moses, something like that. But he had very little interest in actually owning the team. He just kind of did it to do it because he had the money and it's a good tax write-off. And then he decided to put the team into the bankruptcy process in 2009 without the NHL's approval or Gary Bettman's approval. And so then at the end of 2009, the bankruptcy is voted in court, and the league settled with him, and the league bought the Arizona Coyotes to take on the financial troubles of the team. Dave Tippett was hired as a coach to replace Wayne Gretzky, who was subsequently fired after him and Moses lost the team to the NHL. And in their first year back in 2009 with Dave Tippett, they ended up going to the playoffs for their second time in franchise history. And Shane Doan, Keith Yandel, Matthew Lombardi, and Ilya Bryzgalov led the Yotes in 2009 to a 50-win season, finishing 4th in the NHL standings. And in comparison, that's like winning 95-plus games in baseball. They had home ice advantage in that playoff series, but they lost in 7 games to the Detroit Red Wings. But if you know anything about the Red Wings from 1997 to 2014, making them 7 games in a playoff series is a pretty good feat. Like that's something to hang your hat on. But 2011 and 2012 was by far the best year for the Coyotes. They won their division for the first time, and then in the first round of the playoffs, they beat the Blackhawks in 6 games to make it out of the first round for the first time. Shane Doan, Ray Whitney, and Radim Verbata led the offense with Keith Yandel and a rookie, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, manning the blue line. And then in goal, they had Utah Grizzlies legend Mike Smith. The series in the first round was an instant classic with 5 of the 6 games going into overtime. In the second round, the Coyotes met the Nashville Predators, which they won that in 5 games, punching their way to the Western Conference Finals, riding a high the team has been chasing ever since. And then in the Western Conference Finals, they played the LA Kings, who gentlemanly swept the Coyotes just because, they were nice about it, on their way to capturing a Stanley Cup. Now, despite the success in the early 2010s of the Coyotes, Gary Bettman still had a bunch of crap going on trying to sell the team, and he just couldn't find anybody. They had multiple buyers with multiple different ownership groups, and each and every time the city of Glendale or the city of Tempe or one of the cities in Arizona shut it down because they didn't want to be financially responsible for an NHL team that got moved there, not by their choice, basically. The Coyotes and the Renaissance Entertainment Group signed a 15-year lease with the Coyotes in the city of Glendale. The group was renamed to Ice Arizona, but they only were the owners for 1 season, and they sold 51% of the team to a man named Mr. Barraway, who then bought the remaining 49% of the team in 2017 to become the sole owner. After 2 more years of missing the playoffs and being the worst team in the league, in 2019, Glendale attempted to void the 15-year lease they agreed to, but the NHL and Glendale came to an agreement to stay for 2 more years while Barraway tried to move the team to Tempe, which he thought he had a deal with because he had Arizona State University backing him up, and then that deal fell through because Arizona State just didn't. Then in 2021, the team was sold to Alex Morello, who, if you guys have been keeping up, he's not the best owner in the world, or could have been. But so without having a new stadium deal, Arizona State University agreed to let the Coyotes play at Mullet Arena for the time being, which is about a 5,000-seat arena. In the meantime, Morello tried to build a $2 billion district in Tempe with support of the city council, the mayor, and the NHL. But when it was taken to vote, the citizens of Tempe said no. So the Coyotes went back to square one. Moreno tried to get a deal bought in the surrounding areas with no luck. And with the Coyotes missing the playoffs once again in 2023-24, the NHL went forward with their plan to move the Coyotes to Salt Lake, and that is, as the kids say, rock and roll history.
There's the history. That's what's brought us to today. Let me run you down the illustrious playoff history of the Phoenix Coyotes, and they had a great start. The first 4 years in Arizona, they made the playoffs, lost in the first round all 4 years. Then missed the playoffs, made the playoffs again, and in total have made the playoffs 9 times. 8 of those 9 times, they have failed to advance past the first round, except for that magical season Ryan discussed, where they made it to the Western Conference Finals, losing to the eventual Stanley Cup champ Los Angeles Kings. There's obviously a lot of details and things that went into a lot of those real estate deals, a lot of those ownership group deals that it just never did work in Arizona. And Dustin, I don't know if you have an opinion on this. I was thinking maybe it was in Arizona for quite some time, but maybe there's just no appetite for hockey in Arizona. And did Gary Bettman say, did he have his eyes on that money, on that market, and that was all he cared about? He didn't bother to care about, does the market want us? We want the market.
Yeah, when I think about Arizona, when I was growing up, my grandparents, they lived here in Utah, but when the snow started to fall, they went down to Arizona, and that's what I picture Arizona as, like just the snowbird flying south for the winter to get away from the snow in other places. And I don't think there's much call for hockey down there, and I don't think there was. I know that the attendance obviously wasn't great in Mullet Arena because it's such a small stadium, and it's in Tempe rather than the Phoenix area. But I don't think, even when they were in Gila River Arena, I don't think their attendance was ever really that good down there. I believe they were in the bottom 10 in attendance throughout their time there.
I just ran the numbers, Dustin. The average attendance, if you don't include the Arizona State Mullet Arena fiasco, just under 14,000 for the average throughout the entire year. Capped out average attendance at its height. Average that year in the first year in 2005, 15,580 and 15,582. And the lowest non-mullet arena was their last year before moving, a not so great 11,601 fans per game on average.
And you said it was about ish thousand?
Overall, if you don't include mullet arena, 13,966 per game per season.
You look at average attendance numbers, your bottom 7 or 8 in terms of attendance, and that's just that's where they were when the attendance was good and they had a decent stadium before they even moved. You'll see a lot of Coyote fans online talking about, our attendance was good, but then they moved to ASU and that place only held 5,000. That's why your attendance was so bad, and it wasn't good before then.
No, it was not. They actually, if you look at numbers, they actually look like they sold out every game of Arizona State because the arena was so small. So it's funny, they couldn't, attendance-wise, they couldn't get the raw numbers, but percentage-wise, their most attended seasons were in the Arizona State arena. So maybe the small arena, that's where it's at. But it's just not financially sustainable to have that arrangement. How it went 2 full years, I'll never know, but it did. And their loss is our gain. And I'm sorry, like, if I lost a franchise team, I would be devastated, but at the same time, I didn't lose it, I gained it, and I could not be more happy. So thank you, Arizona, for not supporting your team through those many, many down years. We'll see if Utah can keep that up if they continue to be down.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we have just about 13,000 people just to meet the team at the Delta Center a couple weeks ago when they all flew in? Wasn't that around
that was
the same amount?
A free event. And they had to turn away people at the doors because they couldn't let any more people in. So Arizona,
you didn't do it right. We got you guys.
The last season that they were in Gila River Arena, they averaged 11,000 per game. Utah had more than that just to welcome them to Utah. So we'll take better care of them.
Yes, we will. For some context, too, thinking about it, so Utah fans, if you've been to a Grizzlies game, the max capacity for that hockey, the way the hockey stadium was designed for a hockey game was about 12,500. So think of a full arena at the Maverick Center where you were watching the Utah Grizzlies, and think about a sellout crowd, and then add another 6,000 seats. And I'm putting that in context for people maybe you haven't been to a Jazz game, because if you've been to a Jazz game, you basically you imagine, right, what a sellout crowd would look like. So it's going to be exciting for hockey fans in Utah, specifically those that didn't go to the Frozen Fury games, which I don't know. I think they sold out, but I couldn't tell you what the average attendance of those were. But
those were when the NHL came, right? Like
the exhibition, Kings versus Sharks.
Yeah, I was going to say, we went to see the Kings and the Sharks, and that was the most people I've ever seen in the Maverick Center at one time. So it had to have sold out. And that was just to watch these kids trying to make a team.
I really think that it's going to work, and especially those first few years. Like I said, we've discussed it before. We'll see what happens when the bad times come. But at the same time, I feel like the Jazz have had some really down years, and not just like 1 or 2 down years and then a run at the championship. I feel like there's been some heartbreaking seasons, and then there's been times where they're just perennial playoff attenders. And that's where I'm hoping that ebb and flow, Utah can navigate much better than, I mean, the last 10 years of being an Arizona fan was just not good. It was just not good hockey. It's not fun losing and not making the playoffs for 9 of those 10 years. And the 1 year they made the playoffs was the COVID year. So it's like, I feel for you, Arizona, but your loss is our gain, and we're excited for it. No, it does not.
Does the COVID year even count for a playoff run? Like,
nope. The Stars made the only reason we're for sure counting it because the Stars didn't win the Stanley Cup that year, so we can count that. If the Stars had won, though, the whole season is a wash. All right, moving on from the history of the franchise, I do want to talk about, we've got some hype. The NHL draft lottery occurred. The Utah franchise will select number 6th in the first round of the 2024 entry-level draft. And I wanted to talk about not necessarily how the draft works, because it is unique in a sense, but I want to talk about something that maybe fans are not familiar with, or maybe won't be expecting if they've been followers of the NBA draft process and certainly the NFL draft process. The NHL process is a little bit different. And so first and foremost, it does work like the others, where generally the least performing teams get a higher chance at a higher pick, and then the better teams pick later in the rounds, right? And then each round, the one team selects a player, the next team selects a player, and so forth and so on. So it works like a regular draft in that sense. But the pool of people they're selecting from is a lot different. So think of in the NBA, you have, of course, your college kids in the NCAA, and then a few overseas players. Well, what you have in the NHL is you have a pool of basically 18 to 20-year-olds that are playing eligible for the collegiate level, the Canadian junior level, the European and Russian elite leagues. And the NHL will select a player, but that player is in no way, shape, or form necessarily going to play for your team. You have the draft rights to that player. And so this is where it's, I think, distinctly different from the NBA and certainly the NFL, where if an NFL player gets drafted, he generally either makes the team or is cut entirely. In the NHL, you might draft a guy and then he'll go play college for 2 more years. Or you draft a guy. So our first round draft pick from last year's draft is currently still playing in the Russian Elite League, in the MHL. So his name is Dmitry Simashev, and he's a big defenseman. In fact, our last 2 first-round draft picks are both very big defensemen. Maverick Lamoureux and Dmitry Simashev have not played a minute of NHL hockey since being drafted. And that is not an uncommon thing in the NHL. So I want new fans to understand that there's a bigger pool to draft players from. And just because a person is drafted in, say, the first round, they will likely not play at the NHL level for multiple years unless they are a very generational type talent or the need is so great. But you'll see that in like the NBA and the NFL, like if you get drafted in the first round, you're generally playing that same year at the big league. Not the case in the NHL. So I just want new fans of Utah to know is when we have our draft episode, right, we're going to lay out a few people that we think the NHL team in Utah might select. And we're going to give you some upsides, some downsides of some people. But just keep in mind, you may not hear from that player for multiple years before they're in the NHL. The NHL also has, if you're not familiar with it, a very highly developed, maybe second only to baseball in terms of its minor league farm system, and where there are multiple teams that can develop players. Now, I know the NBA has their G League, but even that I think is still a distant third in terms of farm systems. It's relatively new to the NBA, and I still don't think it quite works like where in the NHL you will see call-ups. And we've seen this in Utah, guys. You're watching your ECHL Utah Grizzlies, people come and go, right? They're coming up and down from that league. And that's what those developmental leagues are for, is to develop your NHL guys. And that's a frustrating thing watching a minor league team, because you're like, I really like that guy. He could really do a lot of things for us. But he doesn't play for the Utah Grizzlies, right? He's owned by, in the Grizzlies case, he's owned by the Colorado Avalanche, and their prerogative is to develop him into an NHL talent, not necessarily get the Utah Grizzlies wins. So just keep that in mind as we're drafting players. It might be some time till you see them. Not every guy's a Logan Cooley or that's going to get drafted and immediately play. So keep that in mind and take everything with a grain of salt, and don't necessarily expect our draft picks to become immediately available. But the team does retain the draft rights to them, and we may see them. But as we go, we'll keep you posted on on the comings and goings of everybody. But I just kind of wanted to give that rundown as we approach the draft, that you know. If you have any other questions or anything about the way the minor league system works, just hit us up on Twitter, let us know, and we'll be happy to discuss things, go over it. And keep in mind, as far as I know, the Utah Grizzlies are still going to play hockey, and so you can still get some hockey action outside of the NHL. The minor league team for the Utah team is still the Tucson Roadrunners. I have not heard any different, that they will not be our AHL affiliate. So Arizona, you still have some hockey to be played. And those minor league teams are a lot of fun to watch. So, but yeah, that's the quick rundown of the draft. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Guys, that's just about it. It's just about out of time for us here. Another episode in the books. Any final thoughts you want to leave with the listeners?
Just on what you were just talking about, Randon. If you're listening to this and you're a Jazz fan, and to give you an idea of what it is to like draft a player and stash him away, just think back to 2008 when the Jazz drafted Ante Tomic and he never played in the NBA. It's sort of like you draft a big guy and store him overseas. You draft him, you still have the rights to him, even though they're not playing for your team. It's that same sort of thing. So just when you're thinking about what Randon just said, think of Ante Tomic. If you're a Jazz fan, you know what that is.
Ryan, do you have any final thoughts for the listeners?
My only thing I wanted to add to the draft thing is, unlike, I think, at least in baseball and probably football, first-round draft picks don't necessarily mean the most in the NHL. Like, yes, you can get a super talented guy in the first round, but you can get sleeper guys all the way into the 7th round who are going to be NHL players, sometimes even faster than the first-round guys because they've been working harder a lot. You know what I mean? So just don't let the draft picks, don't let it get confusing, and just remember that what round you're drafted in doesn't necessarily equate to talent level.
No, it does not. In the entry-level contracts in the NHL, there's a lot more parity in them than in the other leagues and the other sports. So entry-level contracts have a lot of power in the NHL. So we're excited.
Look at Wyatt Johnson for Dallas. Exactly. He's on an entry-level contract, and he's killing it.
He's going to be the Conn Smythe winner. Actually, Ottenberg. I guess there's a lot of choices, but entry-level players, they're very powerful if you get to see them in their early years or when they come a little later. So we'll keep you guys updated on all of that and more with the next episode of the Two Line Pass. Thank you guys for joining us. Ryan, Dustin, thank you as always for talking to me today. Hope you have a great night. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Two Line Pass podcast. Please follow us on Twitter at the Two Line Pass. You can follow Dustin at Highlights Ute. You can follow Randon at TLP Randon and Ryan at Carnes Ryan 0420. During the off-season, new episodes of the podcast drop every Wednesday with bonus episodes throughout. And during the season, we will have our weekly show plus game day episodes so you don't miss a minute of the action.